and thank you all for coming. I was talking to Tim earlier about, well, the fact I know nothing about medicine really, but you know, but increasingly, as you probably all know, medicine is almost being prescribed. Sorry, nature is almost being prescribed as medicine, and this is becoming quite almost a cliche now. But I do think we can all benefit from being out in nature, whether you want to watch birds or not, but just being out in nature and observing things in more detail, whether it be the sky or the birds or the landscape. And hopefully this evening I'll show you a little bit about that. Essentially, I'm sort of showing you most of the stuff from North Yorkshire, and we're delving into my sketchbooks a bit and how I work. But we zap off to Scotland and Norfolk occasionally as well, so I hope you'll forgive the odd excursion, but nowhere further than that. So this is a typical day in the office up at Rosedale, not so far from the Lion, so there's always a refuge, not far away, and snow is one of my favourite conditions. I love snow, and sadly we don't get enough of it these days. But being up on the moors in the snow is always a great pleasure. It's somewhere I can escape and be very, very alone, which I do quite enjoy. But as you can see here, your palette tends to freeze. There's literally this metal enamel panel palette is freezing up very, very quickly. It's about -4, and so I have a little flask of warm water, or if I'm really desperate, some spit to sort of keep things going. You can see here the paint's actually frozen and created some kind of interesting sort of pools of colour. It's a nice problem to have. And this is harking back right to 2010. Actually, you'll probably all remember that really, really harsh period of weather before Christmas, 2010. And it started in late November, went right through December. I know Helmsley was dripping with the most incredible icicles, and it really was impressive. And there's enough snow here, there's about 1 foot of snow here, and there's enough to actually make a drawing board. So I've got my brushes stuck in the snow, and it's all very convenient. So it's actually got a snow drawing little studio area. But I love painting those conditions. And then this is at the top of Rosedale. I like sometimes with that great, vast, very flat landscape, once you're up on the top of the moors, it plateaus really. There aren't impressive hills particularly. It gets quite flat to the eye actually. And so it's nice sometimes just to look at the sky and just concentrate on that and those lovely wisps of grass that you get. Sometimes just breaking the landscape down into very simple lines or colours. And this is up near, quite near Danby actually, and you can see what I've tried to do is use the watercolour to get the rain coming from the bottom of the clouds. And then this wonderful thing called, I can go into it briefly, not at one of my lessons, but aerial perspective. So perspective, as we often think of it, is looking down railway lines and things get smaller and smaller, obvious really. But aerial perspective is a little bit different, and that's done through tone. And so the ground beneath your feet is at the warmest, sharpest colour, and then as you go into the distance, gradually it fades into blue. So that's called aerial perspective. And it's a great trick if you're an artist to create depth. So hopefully you're looking from 3 meters here to about 5 miles there, and you've got that illusion of distance created by aerial perspective. So just a theme I do many, many times. Here's a grouse scarpering for it. I didn't have a gun, of course, so it needn't have bothered, but there we go. Common sight on the North York moors. This is right near the main Pickering Whitby Road, actually, a place called Ellerbeck, and just beyond RAF Fylingdales, where you go down that lovely dip, right in the bottom, and there's a nature reserve called Fen Bog. If you walk to the east of the road, very quickly you wouldn't know the road is there. This is literally 200 or 300 yards away from the main road, and you walk up this beautiful beck, and it's the most tranquil, amazing place. Just be careful you don't sort of stumble into Fylingdale's territory and you might be shot or something, but it really is, if you want somewhere very accessible, to park the car and just walk somewhere wild very quickly, it's a very good recommendation. And red grouse is something you see very commonly on the moors, kind of maligned a little bit because there's a bit of conflict between the birding community and the shooting community on this bird. But actually the red grouse itself, take all that out of it, it's the most beautiful bird, great characters. You can drive around the moors and they'll be right by the side of your car sometimes. You can very easily call them up sometimes, and you'll be and they will literally come up to your car. And, Yorkshire farmer goes past and sees me doing that, and yeah, there we are. Moving on. But they are great. They're great characters, and you really can sort of pull them in. Here's a lovely bird up on the uplands or fast streams, the dipper. And what I've tried to do here with the painting is to create the feeling of the force of that water. And then you get these lovely colours looking through the water with these gorgeous sort of ochres and greens of the pebbles and stones beneath. I've deliberately placed the dipper looking against the flow here to try and create a feeling of the power of that water. If I were to face it the other way, it wouldn't have the same sort of impact. So these are little sort of tricks you can use as an artist to aid composition. Ring ouzel is, or sometimes called the mountain blackbird, very closely related to our blackbird, but winters in places like the Atlas Mountains in North Africa, and comes to places like Rosedale. Well, it's still fortunately doing fairly well, but these are blackbirds that kind of, once you get to about 1,500 feet, or a bit less than that, ring ouzels start to take over from blackbirds, and they are the most beautiful, dapper birds, which breed from March through to August. I spent a year in residency at Yorkshire Arboretum, which was really very, very pleasant. It was unfortunately the COVID years, and so there weren't many events, but on my sort of, I can't remember what the rules were called, but it was essential work or something like that. I actually carried on my job at Yorkshire Arboretum as the artist in residence. I did look it up, it was all right, I think. And I had the place to myself, which was, although that wasn't great, a shrewd business move, it was actually fantastic to really enjoy the Arboretum, solo as it were. And spend a lot of time just setting up my scope and sketching the birds. Fungi as well. Having great fun sketching fly agarics, which start appearing particularly in October. So doing studies of those. There's an interesting fungi there called not a shaggy inkcap, it's a bit like a shaggy inkcap, or lawyer's wig as they're sometimes called. You see the wig-like effect there. And then it drips this ink. But that's actually called a magpie fungus, which is really, really beautiful. And so that's another thing to enjoy looking out for in the autumn. There you go. But it is extraordinary. So it goes from this initial thing that comes through the ground to that within about 3 days probably. Complete transformation very, very quickly. I studied individual fungi and followed that process. And then painting oak trees. I became slightly obsessed, if I'm honest, with the shadows of branches. So the branches themselves are obviously wonderful, and the structure and the strength of an oak tree is absolutely a sight to behold. You don't have to be an artist, just stand and look at them. And they're never more magnificent than in winter, actually. You see them, with the sun on them. And the trunks don't look brown. They look silvery very often with green. And Don't know what I've done there, Tim. Can I get rid of that?
It's gone back to normal.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Sometimes life just works out, doesn't it? And I became rather obsessed with these shadows on the trunks, which were, I kept sort of closing my eyes and looking at them tonally, and the shadows were almost as strong as the branches themselves. It just became a bit of a project in itself, just looking at these things. And also on the ground, you can see them also on the ground, these very strong shadows in winter sunlight. You mark my words, when the leaves come off the trees and we get some nice warm weather again and it's winter, you go to the Arboretum or anywhere and start looking at the shadows, you know, and say, thank you, Jonathan, you got me onto that. This wonderful tree, which I have to say, I just became almost like a friend, actually. That does sound really corny, I know, but it's a holly tree. And it's in the perimeter of the grounds of Yorkshire Arboretum, on their old boundary. And it's medieval. I mean, it predates this place. It's absolutely extraordinary. You know, this incredible trunk and this big sort of expanse of leaves and berries in the autumn. And I just, you know, just some trees really moved me, and this was one that I just went back to again and again. All the big oaks, all the big beeches, but that holly tree was just absolutely awesome, and so many different twists and turns in those trunks coming out, and you could imagine all the people who'd sat under it and climbed it and done all sorts of other things under it, and you know, the little carvings that were very old in some of the branches. It just absolutely oozed history to me as much as any cathedral. Amazing thing. So if you want to go and see it, just let me know and I'll point you in the right direction. Ash trees. No, sorry, this is an oak tree. But again, looking at those shadows and treating the tree a little bit like it was a portrait. So I'm not going to get everything exactly right, but I'm looking for the essential sort of features of that tree, and trying to sort of show those off as if it were a portrait of a human or an animal. In the summer, it's lovely, you know, a bit of shade there on a really hot day. No better place, really. Swallow skimming there, like we long to see now. And then kingfishers on the lake, because it was very quiet, there weren't many people around, and I often had the kingfishers to myself, which was rather lovely. Snow in the winter, wonderful effect you get when you have, you know, beautiful clear blue skies and these incredible blue, almost violet shadows, which is basically the reflection of the blue sky on the snow. It's ambient light that's being cast. Hawfinch, which is a really special bird which occurs at the Arboretum. They feed on hornbeam seeds, which are very, very hard. They're a bit like a hawfinch will think nothing of going through an olive stone or a sloe stone. Now, if we did that, we'd probably be down the dentist the next morning. But hawfinches have this incredible beak, and that head has muscles wrapped right round the skull, which enable that bird to create huge pressure. And they make very light work of very, very tough things to get the kernel out of the middle. I'm going to quickly zap over to Norfolk. I spend a lot of time in Norfolk. There's a gallery down there which I show in, and this is at Cly. Marsh harrier over the reeds, something which you could equally see, you know, on the ings around here. Not that unusual these days. The marsh harrier was almost wiped out at one point, but now is a common bird above most reed beds again. Holcombe Bay, which some of you may know, this is in the winter, and again, you know, don't discount winter, don't shut down in winter. There's so much to see, there's so much to enjoy, and Holcombe Bay, this would be depths of winter. You can stand there at dusk, which is of course about 4 o'clock, and then suddenly the sky is filled with geese, pink-footed geese, and it's the first time I saw it, it was slightly frightening. You feel very, very small. and if you're on your own, particularly, this huge mass of creatures coming over you, the great roar of their sound is moving and sort of primeval in a way. And with Holcombe Bay, you can almost imagine sort of dinosaurs coming out of the pines at the edge of the beach. And, magical place. And then you get lovely birds down there like the avocet, which is now increasingly common around here as well. So not just a bird you used to have to go to Norfolk for, but places like RSPB Saltholme, which is an amazing reserve on Teesside. You see avocets now, and even on the Ings sometimes as well, particularly passing through, I think. Not sure they're breeding yet, but increasingly common bird, and very, very beautiful bird. Don't get many things more elegant than that in the natural world. Really, really stunning. Sometimes called exocets because they attack things that come near their nests with great force, actually. Lapwings, this is personally one of my favourite birds. I don't like really picking favourites. I kind of think that's wrong, but if I was forced to pick favourites, lapwing would be a top 5, absolutely, definitely. And for that reason, I do quite a lot of lapwing studies. It's definitely one of those birds that's not that rare, although it's declined hugely as a breeding species, but it's one of those birds that you would travel miles and miles to see if it was rare. It's just absolutely stunning. And the crest, as an artist, the crest indicates the wind direction, gives a sense of the weather. I'm looking for things like that when I'm painting. Here's one alighting in a flock, and you can see a sort of jostling as this one comes in. It slightly unsettles the flock. They'll quickly settle down again. I just wanted to sort of capture a moment in time where a bird alights and the sort of juxtapositions that go on as those birds then rearrange themselves and settle down again. Very much specific times. So this is painted in March when you've got a variety of plumages, but none of them are quite in spring plumage. This one nearly is. The throat is almost entirely black, whereas these haven't got black throats yet joining up. So again, very much I'm painting individual birds. I'm not generalising and doing a lapwing. I'm doing that lapwing and that lapwing and that lapwing. I could keep going on. I could do a whole show on lapwings actually. But this one I wanted to just create that air of peace in the evening, and just sat there on my own quiet time on the nature reserve and just looking at the shapes of all the weeds and the grasses and things. Weeds, I shouldn't say weeds. But all these plants, they're not tidy. You know, they're and as an artist, I'm looking at that very much. That this is how nature does it. You know, they're not always immaculately brushed like you see some grasses painted. They are hickledy-pickledy. They are different shapes. And that's what I'm trying to get across there, but working with that. I suppose I had to say something about swifts on this cold summer night when there's none around. And I'm not sponsored by Barber either. So here we are. This is what I do in the spring, really, on a nice day. And I get out and just paint them from life. And if you're an artist, it's an interesting kind of painting because I'm not doing any underdrawing here. I'm not sketching anything in pencil first. I've just got this a variety of brushes. I dip the brush in the sepia paint and just go for it. And it's a difficult thing to do to begin with, but then once you start doing it, it's a really good thing to do, and you feel an extra amount of pressure because that paper's not cheap, and you think, I don't want to muck this up. And I think it really teaches you to look really hard if you just paint with paint, just draw with paint, if you like. It's a very, very good discipline. Equally, sketching in a pen is another good discipline because, again, you can't rub it out, you can't make these mistakes, and you're looking really hard. So this was a series of studies I did for some of you may have heard of Hannah Bourne-Taylor, who's done a big campaign about getting Swift bricks built into all new houses as standard, which hasn't yet happened, and now we've got to change. We might have a change of government, so we'll see what happens. But this was done for that campaign, and it was looking very much at the variety of wing postures that swifts show, including the fact is, as an artist, it'd be very convenient if they just held their wings flat all the time, but they don't. They do this. They arch them, and then they put them up, and there are infinite number of angles. I could spend a whole life doing angles of swifts, that's what this is trying to show, some of the basic variety of angles. And also the fact that at high speed, when they're banking, they keep their head level, so the head is always kept level, so they've got that sense of where they are. But magnificent birds. And then these are sketchbook studies of, well, as much as anything, they're weather studies, actually. I love the weather. I married a meteorologist. And more conveniently, she's a mathematician as well, because I'm absolutely hopeless at maths, so that's very, very handy. But the joke was when we got together, we loved talking about the weather, and we generally did. But, there you go. It takes all sorts. Yeah, so these are, as much as anything, weather studies. I like to find my inspiration in the skies that I'm seeing, and then I take notes, and down at the bottom, typically you'll see the time and the wind direction and the temperature. So it's very much a moment captured in time. And then that's what we'd like to see at the moment, isn't it? Sort of 21 degrees, nice fluffy cloud, and sitting outside in the garden with something to drink. That's what we all long for.
Some weather in those clouds.
Well, yes, that's true, actually. Probably an hour later you'd be coming in, wouldn't you? It's a good observation, Mark. But anyway, trying to show to show a typical day in the summer when swifts are able to feed up high, and that's what they haven't really been able to do recently. All the insects are being blown out of the air or kept low, and we just haven't seen this scene very often. So, nice thing to look at. And if you look at a swift, this one sadly deceased, killed by a starling. That's not a rant against starlings, it happens. Nature is nature. And they fight over nest spaces, basically. But if you look at the profiles here, look at that incredible profile, reminiscent of the B-2 or B-1 bomber, I can't remember which, from the side, that incredible aerodynamic shape. And I think Boeing probably owes Swift a heck of a lot, actually, in terms of aviation design. When you look at their wings, if you look at the latest jet designs, the wings are every bit like a Swift, and they taper in the same spots. So come on, Boeing, buy some Swift boxes. But when Swifts start prospecting, they're quite interesting because they take a while to approach and land, just like any pilot would, and they often get it wrong, so their aiming goes wrong. So you can see here there's one perching on a house martin's nest, which it's never going to nest in. They perch on random bits of eaves, but eventually they get it right and they start looking into potential nest holes, as here and as here. With that one, it'll probably fall away very, very quickly. It's not really balanced, but eventually they will go in, and that's a moment of triumph if you've tried to attract swifts. It's a great thrill. I was really lucky to be, Mascot Media published this book for me back in 2018. And the reason I feel so lucky is that it not only obviously showcased my work, but it's given me a platform for swift conservation. And since then, I've used this book really to just talk all over the place. I was launching a swift project at Machynlleth in mid-Wales a couple of weeks ago. On the local co-op where they'd put 32 swift nest spaces on. Co-op are setting the trend in Wales and doing this on other stores as well. So it's given me a platform to really get involved and bring swifts to lots and lots of people. And of course, swifts are just part of it, really. Swifts represent so much more. They represent other hole nesting species. They represent insects. If we didn't have insects, we wouldn't have swifts. And we need to protect insects. So swifts I see as a sort of flag bearer for lots of other things. And here's another sheet of them prospecting. And if you look closely, there's little sky studies here. There's a hobby here, and the swifts get up and behind a hobby. Hobby is capable of catching a swift. Very, very fast, agile falcon. that visits us for the summer and spends most of its time feeding on dragonflies, but I should think a swift is worth quite a few dragonflies, so if it can get them, then it will. This one, interestingly, is a cuckoo that flew over Gilling East, and the swifts, like many other birds, saw it as a predator, which is interesting because it posed no threat at all to a swift, but they all got behind it and saw it out of their airspace. And then just studies of flocks, how they form and how they fly. Again, could do a whole lifetime just doing flock arrangements. Then towards the end of the summer, you start to see more and more of this. Swifts gather very, very high in these big screaming flocks. Somewhere like Helmsley, you'll see these big flocks over the marketplace. And you know that in the next few days, they'll be gone. Come early August, that will be it. It's like somebody flicks a switch and the vast majority of them would just go overnight. Interestingly, swifts get pulled. Oh, sorry, in my way. Swifts get pulled towards the air, particularly when they come to the end of their breeding cycle, which is about 2.5 months. You can see them just literally being pulled back to the air, and they don't want to be in a nest box. They don't want to be in a roof. They want to be up there, and they stop roosting down in a box as quickly as they can and get back up in the air. And then that next 9 months before they come back, they'll be going right down through Europe, to Africa, to the Congo Basin, and across to Mozambique, back to the Congo Basin, back up. Just the most incredible journey. And they won't land once. They'll be roosting the whole time in the sky. So for the young birds, which fledge in August or late July, that could potentially be 2 or 3 years non-stop on the wing. So,
sorry, how do you roost in the sky?
Pretty astonishing. Well, I haven't tried it myself, but it's still a mystery. It's a little bit like, you could compare it a little bit to research that's been done recently on sharks. So sharks roost in the water, and so they don't go down and settle on the ground. So they have to kind of suspend themselves, and they want to stay in more or less the same place. So I think the thinking is that there's a way of half shutting the brain on different sides, but we could just leave it.
So they're still in the air, they're still moving.
Yeah. Well, the same moving. If there's a wind, they'll try and orient so that they come back down in the same place the next morning. So, so all overnight, they're keeping that location, even if 1,000 meters up. They're keeping the same location. So if they go up above my house at dawn, they'll come down on my house as well. So it's.
Do the fledglings go straight off to do that?
Yes.
Or do they go
Yes. As far as we know, there's no evidence whatsoever that fledglings hang around. So they leave the nest box, and as Mark said, there's this critical first flight, because if they get it wrong and they land, they very often predated. So it's a very critical first flight. They're not fed again by their parents once they leave, and so they just fly off. And there has been records of them being recorded the next day in Biscay, having left Britain. So they're pretty. They're quite cool things. You see why I like them. But they're not so liked as their lovely not cousin actually, or fellow aerial insect eater, the house martin, which does have it's not great at its own PR. It tends to poo out of its nests in vast quantities, but you need to get a life, and you need to just sweep it up and deal with it, because these are wonderful birds, absolutely beautiful birds, and in sharp decline, not helped by the fact some people knock their nests down, which is entirely illegal in the breeding season.
Do they make the nests sort of under an eave,
Yes.
fastened onto the side of a wall?
Yes, classically so one good way of telling these birds apart actually is by where they build their nest. If it's a mud nest and it's outside under some eaves, it's going to be a house martin. If it's a mud nest in a stable or a shed or a garage, inside it's a swallow. If it doesn't build a mud nest at all, because it's not related to the other two, and goes into a hole in the roof, it's a swift. So entirely different ways of nesting. It's a good way of explaining to people what they've got. And here's a typical studio scene, usual mess, but A few bits and bats there which are hopefully saleable. Go and quickly buzz through some garden birds now, more familiar birds. And song thrushes are doing very, very well in the Gilling area. There seem to be a really abundant bird. Excuse me. And beautiful, absolutely beautiful things. I used to see them a lot as a child on the lawn, much more so than I do now. Every time one comes down to the lawn now, it seems to be chased off by a blackbird. But in the old days, they seem to be easier to see on the lawn. But a smaller cousin from the continent. This is redwing, which visit our shores in vast numbers come October and November. If you're on the east coast, somewhere like Flamborough Head, mid-October, and you're lucky, winds are in the northeast perhaps, you could see hundreds of these birds arriving over the sea. And it's a miracle of migration. Basically, they start off in Scandinavia with a tank full of food, and they hope that tank lasts. It's a bit like us going on a motorway journey. We hope to get to the service station and we've only got a quarter of a tank left, or whatever. And if that tank runs out, brutally, they just ditch in the sea. There's nothing they can do. So it's an incredible thing, migration. The vast majority of them make it, but there are plenty of tales of birds that come down a few feet, sometimes just a few feet from landfall, and they're taken back out by a wave, and that's it. It's that critical. So it's actually, I'd recommend it if you can get over to Flamborough in the autumn. There'll be birders there who hopefully help you see what you want to see, and if you ask. And these birds are literally coming in to have a milder winter with us. And with it there, it's larger cousin, the fieldfare. Beautiful, beautiful birds. And they go back in March and April.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
How
Hi.
far south of the east do they go? Do they reach Cleethorpes?
Oh yes, definitely. So they will come. They will cover the UK basically. These are these are common birds which will keep going west and south, and some will reach Ireland, some will go right down to Cornwall, some will go right down then through France and Spain. So they're all escaping Scandinavia, and you've just got to be alert and get ready to see them. If you get a very hard winter, you can put some apples on your lawn, and fieldfares will just come down to any old apple. So get some cheap Tesco apples or something and put them on the lawn, and these birds will come down. They're absolutely incredible looking birds.
What about the
Redwings they will, but they're far less dominant than fieldfares. So they're much smaller, more timid. So they tend to be around the outside a bit more. But look for redwings, particularly in November, on hawthorn berries. They love hawthorn berries. So if you're driving along roads around here and you see flocks of thrush-sized birds come out of the hedge, very often redwings. But, beautiful birds to look out for. The garden birds, just for a variety of garden tits there. Long-tailed tit, not actually related to the others, slightly different family, but a huge favourite these days, and visit loads of gardens and lots of feeders all over the place. But what an absolutely stunning little bird there. Well, they all are. I think, again, you can sort of imagine these birds are rare, and you think, well, blue tit, look at the blue tit, it's just beautiful. And the great tit, just lovely birds. Tree sparrows, we're lucky to get tree sparrows in this area. A lot of the country doesn't get tree sparrows. Literally 100 miles west of here, you'd be lucky to find a tree sparrow. So we're very blessed in this area to have these birds. Goldfinch. Again, look at that, what a bird. You just have to sometimes just stop. They're common, but just look, and they're just oozing colour and character. Great spotted woodpecker, bird that's done extremely well, increased by about 400% in the last 25 years, which is definitely a mixed blessing because it's a voracious predator, absolutely beautiful bird, but we'll think nothing of going through a nest full of baby house martins or blue tits, but absolutely stunning bird. But one thing that's coming out increasingly is that garden bird feeding has been a massive experiment, and we're starting to see some results of that now. So some birds which we've obviously helped and increased, and now competing with more timid species, which are becoming rare and even wiped out in some areas. So there's a big discussion which nobody actually wants to have, because feeding garden birds does a huge amount for our own well-being. People love to see it. For some people who can't walk or stuck in flats, what better than to be able to look out on some birds in the garden? And so there's a really big conversation to be had over where it's going in the future, I think. Yeah.
Yorkshire Wildlife Trust has just published exactly on that last week, the state of nature in Yorkshire, and it showed that actually the common birds, the common species are getting more common.
Yep.
The rares have been,
Yep.
the rare species are disappearing.
Exactly that.
The willow tit.
Yeah, exactly that.
And it's just,
Yeah.
so how do you reverse
Yeah,
that?
I can't see a way to reverse it really. It's a really tricky one. But I guess we might see more about that conversation in the future. But yeah, I'm not going to offer a solution, and I'd hate to take away that enjoyment that so many people have. So yeah, very difficult. Wren, gorgeous, common. Waxwings, which are around this autumn, lovely birds. They visit about once every maybe 5 or 6 years, sometimes more actually. But when they do, they often make quite a mark. And I know waxwings are right in the heart of York in November. Really stunning things. Barn owls seem to be doing pretty well, although they'd be struggling in this weather. They don't like wet, they don't like wind. But this one was in bright sunshine on a wall at Castle Howard in the Arboretum. And I love the contrast, the way the light was catching the owl on the top of the wall, and then this dark background. And there's some more waxwings. Absolutely incredible things. Very, very tame. They come from such remote habitat, right up in northern Russia and even Finland, and they don't see people, and they're just not frightened of people. So they just hang around supermarket car parks where we put berry bushes and things, and gardens, and delight us all if you're lucky to see them. A few owls, little owl. Struggling a bit now. Used to be more common than it is now. But this was actually introduced by the Romans about 200 years ago to take care of mice in barns and things. But it's done very well. Oh no. Robin. Wren. Nest building's always fun to watch. I mean, it's interesting nest building because you tend to think of nest building as being to keep eggs and to keep the chicks safe, but actually the structure and architecture of a nest is as much about protecting the adult bird, because that adult bird has to sit still, often in very, very cold temperatures. It's a bit like us having the right jumper on, and that nest is absolutely essential. That bird can't do that to look after its eggs if the nest isn't well built. So the nest is very much not just for eggs and young, but to keep that adult, to be able to take care of those eggs and young. Really interesting studies coming out on that, about how nests protect the adults and keep them warm. So this is rook. I love rooks. They're just fantastic. I love the way they have baggy trousers and they look like they're skewered on a branch. So there's another thing, very common thing to look for. Enjoy your rooks. Pied flycatchers. This time of year up on the moors, if you go to places like Snarlsworth or further afield to Bolton Abbey Woods and places like that, Stridwood, you can see pied flycatchers. Little gems, just black and white, but actually when in a woodland context where everything is bright green and sort of yellowish, this black and white, somehow it looks exotic, really exotic. And redstarts, which often nest in the same sort of habitat as pied flycatcher. Beautiful, beautiful things. There's a few pairs of these around Byland Abbey, if you happen to be up that way. But you'll need your binoculars and you need patience to see them. But if they're singing, they appear very easily on the Merlin app. We were talking to somebody about that earlier on. So the Merlin app can help you locate birds like that, and then you can find them. So it's a good way of working. I said we go to Scotland for the Scottish here, and this is Balnakeil Bay up in the far northwest of Scotland. a magical place. If you go in May, you see birds that are going up to the high Arctic, just stopping off, making their last stop before they go on the next leg of their journey. But it's just a wonderful place just for landscapes. And you get birds like eider ducks. These are eider drakes actually, but beautiful, beautiful species. Quite a big duck which feeds on crabs and shells by diving into the sea. See these in Northumberland sometimes as well. Then you've got the auks. These are my personal favourites, the razorbills, which have this beautiful markings around their beaks. Lovely warm, sort of dark brown plumage, contrasting with that beautiful sharp white plumage underneath. Puffins, everybody's favourite, absolutely stunning things. Tried to capture the light here of the bird being lit on its back, and the head and the breast in shadow down here, and the sun just catching its beak as well. And then we're on this is the Isle of Skye. Not so far from Talisker, and whatever it was called, I can't remember. I couldn't quite get to the name earlier, did we? But I did a bit of swimming here, which is quite cold. But I was actually swimming with 2 red-throated divers in the bay, which was just a huge thrill. And here they are close up, absolutely breathtaking-looking birds. These are sometimes called the rain goose because they have the most beautiful cry that is indescribably wild and fits the place really. I think that's true of a lot of bird calls, that they really evoke a place, and that can feed into our, if we're stuck in, on a rainy day sometime in town in the winter, and you can think back to a red-throated diver call back on Skye or somewhere. It's quite a magical thing to be able to conjure up in your mind. And my ringtone on my phone is actually red-throated diver, which really frightens people. It sounds a bit like some banshee somewhere. But yeah, wonderful things. And then black-throated divers, which are a bit more bulky. And this is a classic Sutherland landscape up near Ullapool. Very, very wild, very, very remote. And you get these wonderful birds and the sounds that go with them. And that's a black-throated diver, which is just awe-inspiring. Its plumage is just awe-inspiring. That's all I can say. If you get a good look at one, it's just breathtakingly beautiful. The stripes, these stripes on the breast here, and then they call them piano keys sometimes on the back. This black throat actually has a hint of purple in it as well, and this lovely, beautiful, warm grey head with a stunning ruby eye. But they are just magical things. There's about 100 to 200 pairs of those in the whole of the UK, all in Scotland. And yeah, if you're up there and you get a chance, ask someone and go and see one if you can.
Saw a pile on North Yorkshire. This was so low in the water.
Yeah.
It was very hard to unload the head.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy for me to say because I have the advantage of a telescope and I'm watching it long range and seeing really well through good optics. But yeah, it's worth the 2,000 quid for a telescope just to see one of those. in my opinion, my wife is still trying to be persuaded on that one. But here's some studies back at home in Gilling. Just checking my go for time. And I love, as I say, painting the weather. So here's some hail tanking it down out of the sky. Lots of sky studies, part of my practice, if you like. Like a musician or a pianist might do scales, I do skies. It's a great way of honing your watercolour skills and observational skills. And skies are there all the time and they're free. It's just, just look at skies. It's brilliant. This is dawn at Gilling. This is say 4:03 a.m. This is. So I do get up at some crazy times, but part of that is doing surveys for the British Trust for Ornithology, called the Breeding Birds Survey. And if you hear stats on the news about declines of certain species, it's all people like me and several thousand others who are doing these surveys and collating that information. That's where it all comes from. It's all volunteers, it's citizen science, but we all have to be able to identify a good range of birds. And in a typical survey, most of what I identify and record is heard rather than seen. So it's a huge advantage to know your bird calls when it comes to survey work. Relatively few birds I actually see, and nearly all heard singing, so you have to be pretty good at calls. And these are various scenes around Gilling, which I did in lockdown when we couldn't go far. But actually it was a hugely influential time for me because I'd been doing pictures typically for galleries, and to a point you try and paint what sells, and you have to keep going. But lockdown, of course, like everybody, we were stuck at home, and so for me, I just went back to just painting like a student, really, and just painting what I liked and enjoying that. And I quickly realised I was doing much better work than I was before, pandering to galleries or doing commissions and things. So it was a very influential time, and I've just kept that going since. Sky studies. These are field fairs. We talked about field fairs earlier. So the birds flying across this typical scene in the autumn. You might see the autumnal landscape. This is November, and you can see the field fairs training across the sky in big sort of raggledy flock. Same trees again and again, with different skies and different temperatures and different weather. This is Gilling Lakes or Yearsley. If you walk down through Yearsley Woods, you'll get down to Yearsley Lakes. Red kite's becoming a very common bird now. This is up near a little village called Alston, yeah. And Vale of York in the background. So. Dusk, blackbirds singing, that wonderful time of day when everything goes quiet. It's just the blackbirds singing in the evening. And blackbird song is so rich and unhurried and leisurely as a song. It's a beautiful thing to just sit there and listen. Barn owl hunting. More studies in the snow. And this one was actually done by the snow, because I put a wash on the sky and it started snowing, and the snowflakes settled in the wash and took out the paint. So every one of those marks in the sky is actually produced by a real snowflake. So I actually won't sell this picture because I'm so fond of it, just for the memories and for that unique situation when the snow was actually working with me to paint it.
Did you have to blow the snowflakes off?
Yes.
Otherwise it would have deposited.
Yeah, to a point I did. But yeah, there came a point where I had to stop, because had it kept on snowing, it would have just obliterated everything. So like anything, it's sort of sometimes knowing when to stop. And that's very much the case with art. But it just worked, for me it worked anyway. Lovely snow. This is up near Goathland, Scarborough, North Bay, Curlew and Scarborough. Great. It's a really good place around the water park bit of Scarborough, North Bay area, because the wall is exactly the right height for a desk, and it's about the right width, so you can put all your equipment onto the wall. And it's just brilliant. If you want to practice painting, it's outside. It's a really good place to go. What's it called? The Marine Life Centre, whatever it's called. If you walk along, Sea Life, that's it. If you walk along from there, there's this wonderful wall, which is perfect for just spreading out your paints and your sketchbooks, and just the right height to work. Good tip. And you see lots of curlews when the tide comes in. Beautiful bird, sadly under threat. Occasionally you get the hazards like this sometimes. Miraculously that picture survived quite well. It actually looks like the two very small humans as well. But Sands End is a favourite place to paint. Again, actually, there's a lovely wall, about exactly the right height, exactly the right width to put all your equipment down. You can bolt to your car if you don't want to be seen, and it's a really good place to just practice your seascapes. Very accessible. And then I found a fossil, so I put that on the paper. Beautiful. Quite proud of that one actually. It just peeped out at me from as the sea went back, and there it was. Lovely find. Stormy. This one's painted in oil. Don't do many oils, but this one is painted in oil with a palette knife, very fast, and just trying to get that madness of the sea. And then here we are again. This is me working on that lovely wall space. And look carefully at the next slide, which a friend did for me, which I think is quite an interesting juxtaposition. Have you got it yet? So he reversed the painting and the photograph, which was a really interesting project. Well, not a project for him because he works with graphics and does it very quickly, just like that. But I got to say, I found it quite fascinating to look at that, and yeah, bit different. And then you've got to end with the sunset. So here are some swifts lining up for a very low and fast fly past, such as we will not see this evening, I guarantee you. But yeah, so that's my little trip through Yorkshire and beyond. But has anyone got any questions?
I've got a question, but that was stunning. Your art is stunning.
That's very
so
kind.
thank you for that. But also your passion for the Yorkshire Arboretum, where I have the good fortune to volunteer as a gardener regularly every week.
Yep.
So I get the absolute joy of seeing such a beautiful place. I can talk about it in the same terms as you do, because I'm totally in love with it.
Yeah.
But I can watch it change week by week, month by month, season by season, year by year, because I've been doing it for years now. And I would urge anyone who's got time on their hands to become a volunteer at Yorkshire Arboretum. All sorts of different jobs. And also this year they are celebrating their 25 years since they were first opened to the public.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And at this time of year, as well as the trees, they have incredible wildflower meadows that are breathtaking. And you won't, if you go on the right day, not recently, but they're teeming with butterflies, aren't they, and bees and insects. Just beautiful to wander around.
Dawn chorus walks, insect walks, alien bug walks. Just look on the website and you'll be amazed at what is on offer. And the cafe is completely
very good cafe, really decent coffee. Very decent coffee, isn't it? And some nice snacky lunches as well, really good ones. Yeah. And I've got an exhibition there next spring, so look out for that. So, yeah, thanks for that. It's a great place to go. Yeah, really fantastic. Yeah.
Is it the birds or is it painting? What's your first love?
I think I'd have to say it's the love of the landscape and the birds. You know, and the painting is a way of me expressing that passion. It's always driven by the subject, very much. And actually, I do think of Bird Fair every year and the Society of Wildlife Artists. And when we all get together, it's quite interesting because we don't get into arty pretensions or anything like that. We just talk about what we've seen and what we've enjoyed. And, you know, that passion I think particularly maybe with wildlife artists really shines through when we get together. And there's a great camaraderie about what we've done in the field and the conditions we've endured and what we've enjoyed. So it's a passion for the subject, I think, that drives the art. But then, you know, hopefully the art will continue to develop, and definitely it has in the last few years. Lockdown was a massive change for me, in a good way. So, yeah, hopefully that will continue to develop. Mark?
You've shown us all your things. You've been doing set piece sketches. taking your kit, sat down and painted something. Do you walk around with a sketchbook as well?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there are different sketchbooks for different occasions. I've got one tucked in here now. There's a small one, there's a big one. You know, sometimes with the big walls around Scarborough where you can put your stuff down, you can get a big A3 sketchbook which becomes A2, and you know, and so there are different sketchbooks for different occasions. But sketchbook work for me is really important. Although increasingly I'm actually selling some of the work that I'm doing in the field, so it's effectively I'm selling what would go in a sketchbook. But a lot of my sketchbook work I really don't want to part with, because interestingly, if you look back at a sketch, it's not just that particular day or bird or sky, it brings back how old your children were, or all sorts of memories around it. It's quite extraordinary. It's a bit like hearing a tune. You know, we all know that feeling where you hear a tune, it brings back memories of, I don't know, baby in a cot or something, or you know, and it's very much the same with sketching. It can bring back all sorts of interesting memories. Not all of them good sometimes, but. Sorry, yeah.
Well, I'm having a day of coherence here. It's very unusual because this afternoon we went to the Monet exhibition with the city.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, I must get along to that, yeah.
Not, but it's actually, there's only one Monet picture. but,
No, but yeah.
It's preceded by earlier, mainly French artists that sort of led into Impressionism.
Yeah.
And then it actually had another gallery at the end, which was some people that were influenced after. So it was very, very interesting, well curated exhibition.
Yeah.
But it was all about skies and the fact that the Impressionists and the people that preceded them were outside.
Yeah.
Doing exactly what you're doing. Doing their stuff in the studio.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought it was very interesting. But I want to ask you is how much of yours is actually finished outside?
Well,
particularly the detailed birds, you said this was a specific bird.
Yeah, so everything in a sketchbook is done outside or on location or on plein air. So anything you've seen in a sketchbook is done outside. A lot of the Swift skies are done kind of outside. I'm in the garden just outside my studio for something like that one. Yeah, and then there are some that are worked from those sketches, sometimes combining with the photographs. So I don't like to work entirely from photographs. That occasionally when I'm sketching, I'm sort of doing this. Like with, for example, the lapwings, the one that was settling in the flock. Every so often I might just take a couple of shots with a bridge camera. I'm no photographer, I don't have expensive camera gear, but it just gives a reminder or a slight backup in detail that can sometimes be difficult to get with the birds moving so fast. So it's a combination sometimes of some studio pieces of using those sketches and sometimes my own photographs, or only ever my own photographs. But yeah, it's an interesting thought, because what would Monet have used photography? I bet they would somehow, but you know, it's an interesting, you know, we have that now, we can't ignore it. It's so it's a question of using it wisely, I think, not overusing it, not slavishly copying it, but using it where it's useful, perhaps to back up.
That's the film of Monet painting.
Oh, he did have cameras actually, didn't he? Yeah, he did. Sorry. Yeah.
In his beautiful white suit and his white hat.
Yes.
Huge, great beard, long paintbrush.
Yeah.
And it was look down, look.
Yeah.
Down, look. Down.
Yeah.
It was virtually no more than that.
That's really interesting because there's I remember one tutor telling me that it's 90% looking, 10% marking, you know, and there is that thing is the sort of cliches, draw what you see rather than what you think you know, and it's very easy to draw what you think you know. You assume a tree is going to be brown in the trunk with some green, but actually it's silvery grey, or you know, so you draw what you see, not what you know. So it's that balance of that. Yeah, I really must get along to that. You've inspired me to go. Yeah. Who? Okay, that's fine.
The question I was going to answer has been asked, which is how you go about it.
Yeah.
Use of photography, etc. But absolutely fantastic. And I was wondering if you do any courses or any. Do you
here and there. I might well be doing some more with my Arboretum exhibition next year. I've just been down to Suffolk to do a course on swifts at Woodbridge, sketching swifts. I'm not, if I'm honest, a great organise. Well, most of those things tend to be organised by somebody else, and then they pay me to go along and do it. Yeah, watch this space. Keep an eye on the website, and yeah, something will probably crop up locally sooner or later. But probably the Arboretum next spring will be the one to watch for. Yeah, one more.
Yeah, one more, and then we'll have the vote of thanks.
Yeah.
What is the source of your raw materials?
Oh, wow! Am I allowed to advertise?
Yeah, go on. Everyone wants to know where you get your gear.
Everything I use is Winsor, in terms of watercolours, it's Winsor & Newton artist range, not the Cotman range, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but the artist range, the colours are supposed to outlast me, that's the main thing. Actually you'll find with different ranges of paints, one colour that's got the same name will be totally different on paper. So Payne's Grey and Cotman, for example, is very different to Payne's Grey and artists. I much prefer the artists. You do tend to get what you pay for. The paper is expensive stuff. It's like cardboard.
Where is the source?
Well, I often use a firm called Jackson's online, because living in Gilling, I don't get a chance to get to an art shop very often. So Jackson's Art, yeah, well, that's right, sadly, because, yeah, I'm afraid so most of the time, yeah.
So can I ask Bob to give the vote of thanks, which is
It's a tradition
of the society.
I'm not going to say very much, really, but I just thought that was amazing, and I can see a lot of people in the audience are particularly interested in painting and birds. Absolutely fantastic. What was I going to say? Things I was going to pick up. Oh, your office. Wow. For those of us who've been stuck in an office for decades, it's just wonderful to have an office out there.
Yeah.
The frozen palette, I won't forget that one. And also these wonderful places you've told us about where nobody goes. Now we're all going to go there. I've been making notes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I've learnt a lot about birds. The trouble is, I'm not a birder, and people tell me things about birds, and then I forget their name. I just love to look at them.
It's just, yeah, a rose isn't sweet by any other.
But yeah. And so I've learnt an awful lot today. I mean, I do a little bit of painting, but that's what I was asking about courses and things. But no, it's been so good on so many different counts, and I'm sure we'll all join to thank you for coming here tonight.